Okay, hello everyone. I think we can start the second half of our event, and I want to introduce Kris Shankar. He is a Microsoft executive and writer who, he's smiling there. Kris is going to share with us a story about his awakening with the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. And I myself am very curious to hear his story because even though I'm from India, I haven't had that much of a exposure to the works of Patanjali. So welcome, Kris.
Hi there. Thanks, Lakshmi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Looks like folks are still rolling in from lunch. So I'm going to share my screen here. I have a PowerPoint. I worked in the tech industry and I'm used to presenting things with a PowerPoint. So I'll go with that. Let's see, how do I share my screen in Zoom? Here we are.
Green share screen at the bottom. Do you see it?
Yeah, I see it. Can you see my screen now?
You have to, yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Great. Okay, let me see. I'm trying to. Okay, so like Lakshmi said, I'm sharing an experience of awakening that mirrored the teachings of the famous Indian sage Patanjali, who lived about 2,000 years ago. And this happened quite a while back. In fact, this goes back all the way to June of 1990, when I was a student at Kansas State University. I'd flown straight from India, never left India in my life. I'd flown straight to the heart of the US, to Kansas. Quite a culture shock, as you might imagine. But I'd spent 2 years going to graduate school, studying engineering. I'd partied hard. Awakening, what's that? I had no such notion of the esoteric and of things like awakening. And all I was really concerned about at that point was how do I finish my thesis? And you can see it's a beautiful campus, Kansas State University. You know, these old style buildings, nice engineering building. You can see me sitting on the far right when I still had hair on my head. I'm sitting in the engineering lounge in Turland Hall. So a very interesting thing happened at around this time. There's this homeless woman who was a cancer survivor, and she would come and sleep in on the couches in the lounge that you saw in the previous slide. And the lounge would be full of students studying, and we'd all be extremely uncomfortable with her presence. That's how a lot of people react to homeless people. We'd rather they didn't exist. We'd rather that homelessness was somebody else's problem. And we tried our best to avoid any eye contact with this woman. And she would be chased out eventually by the security guard, and we'd be quite relieved to see her go. I'd also hang out with my friends at this coffee shop. We led a very bohemian lifestyle. You can see some of us in the picture on the lower left here in the cafe. And one day, my friend Rami, who's from Jordan, he's the guy on the bottom right, he and I were playing chess in the coffee shop, and the homeless woman walked in, and she made eye contact with us, and she walked straight up to our table, sat down with us, and started talking. And we were, of course, polite. We even bought her a coffee, but eventually we made some excuse or the other to leave, because you know, who wants to hang around with a homeless woman? So anyway, back to my thesis. At this point, I just wanted to get the hell out of Dodge, so to speak. I'd spent 2 years in Kansas. I was kind of done being a student, and I was a student in this class of this professor called Dr. Grosh, and he had this 8 a.m. morning class, and I would be up late partying, and I'd often come into his class very sleepy, and I mastered the art of sleeping with my eyes open. And I would sit in the front desk and I'd be asleep, but it looked like I would be awake. But he saw right through that. He'd been teaching for many years, and he knew I was dozing off in his class. And so when it came to defend my thesis, that he refused to sign it. That's what I call my thesis problem. He was not going to let me graduate because he didn't like me. Anyway, I was down to my last few dollars. I didn't have any money. I ended up sleeping on the couch in my friend Rami's apartment. He was nice enough to let me sleep there. But despite all these setbacks, despite having no money, despite sleeping on someone's couch, and my thesis being blocked, I still felt great. I was still resilient, and I owe that to a couple of things. I had this notion as I was wrapping up graduate school that I must keep my mind fit. So I started playing chess, and I would play about 4 hours of chess each day with various friends in that same cafe. I started doing mathematics. I started doing calculus just for the fun of it. Again, just to keep my mind fit. And then just before bedtime, I would listen to an hour of jazz music. And I wasn't just listening to the music, I was listening to it very actively with great intention. Because I had this intuition that I needed to be very focused in all these activities to keep my mind in good shape. And the result of all that highly focused activity, later on, I found out put me in this kind of flow state. The flow state is not a term I knew back then. It's a term I know now. But intense concentration is actually a well-known yogic practice. And at that point, because I had no clue of any of that, but the fact that I was spending over 10 hours a day in intensely concentrated activities put me in this really great state of mind. And so one day as I was doing this, I said, let me take it one step further. I'm going to try and become one with the music. I'm going to see if I can lose all sense of myself and completely identify just with the music. And I found that I was able to really do that. Then I took it one step further. I said, can I become the vibrations of the music? Can I feel this vibration in every part of my body? And I started feeling these vibrations at different parts of my body as I'd listen, especially in response to the bass notes in the jazz music. And the next question that occurred to me was, what am I? Am I this sense of presence behind my eyeballs, or can I be anywhere in my body? Why should my sense of myself not be, for example, in my little finger or in my toe or in some other part of my body? And so I started moving my awareness to different parts of my body. And this was, again, just driven by curiosity. I had no such notion of awareness or, moving the awareness or vibration or any of these things. These were just things that intuitively came to me because I had lots of time. All I was doing was working on my thesis. Well, what happened with all those activities was one night as I was going to sleep after listening to my jazz music, I suddenly saw all the thoughts in my head as if they were on a screen in front of me. And I was this watcher, and the thoughts were these objects floating in front of me, and they flickered at a very high speed, and then they suddenly just died out. All the thoughts just went silent. And I went like, wow, what is that? And I felt this tremendous clarity and silence inside of me. And
also, for the next should read Divine Sage Magic Mint.
Sorry,
the active compound is salvinorin A, the dissociative hallucinogen.
Oops,
it's so unique that it was considered to be put in its own class alongside stimulants, depressants, and hallucinogens, etc. Because of this, it is
right. Okay. So anyway, at this point, for the next few days, I just had this absolutely dreamless sleep. My thoughts had truly just died off. And this one night, I found myself asleep with my eyes closed. but yet aware and yet able to see the room around me. It was pitch dark, my eyes were closed, I was clearly asleep, but I was clearly awake at the same time. And I found this the strangest experience. And I was amused because in my head I was going like, wow, I mastered the art of sleeping with my eyes open in Dr. Grosch's class. And here I am with my eyes closed and asleep, but I'm awake. This stage or this period was also accompanied by boundless energy and optimism. I would wake up every morning at 4 a.m. full of energy. And even though I was without a job, even though my thesis was not complete, I was full of optimism and joy. And this is a very different state from the state I'd been in, say, 6 months back, when I was this very stressed out, agitated graduate student trying to figure out how to complete my thesis. Well, the story goes on. So I was sleeping on Rami's couch, as I mentioned, and his landlord did not like that. So he forced Rami to, basically ask me to leave, and I was homeless. It was my turn to be homeless. I didn't have anybody else to stay with. So while my few belongings were still in Rami's house, I had to go sleep on the floor of the library in one of the buildings on campus. And this continued for about 2 to 3 weeks. And every morning at around 6 a.m., this older Black woman who was the janitor would come to clean the library. And she and I would exchange, looks. And she had this look full of compassion, and she would not bother me or disturb me as I slept on these cushions that I'd put on the floor from one of the couches in the library. And so she became kind of my friend. We never exchanged a word, but we were clearly friends. And this continued for about 2 or 3 weeks until finally my thesis was complete and I decided I was going to leave Kansas. But yet more was to come before I could actually leave. While I slept in the library, I started developing this toothache. I'd had too much Coca-Cola over the last 2 years. Graduate students live on Coca-Cola. And I found that my lower right molar was throbbing with pain. So what I did was to actually just sit and bring my awareness to the toothache. And I found that by really becoming aware and being present with the toothache, the pain would just subside and disappear. Another day, I felt the onset of a migraine headache. I used to get migraines about a year back, and I have not had one in a while. But I suddenly started feeling this throbbing over my left eye, and I saw these wavy patterns in my visual field, and then a gap in my visual field, and I went, uh-oh, I've got another migraine coming on. And again, I just sat down and brought my awareness to the sensations, and the migraine just melted and disappeared away, never set in. And it was obvious to me at that point that pain is just another thought on the screen of the mind. Well, I had no framework to explain what I was experiencing. But one day in a bookstore, I found a book just called Yoga. And I'd never really ever read a book on yoga before, even though I'm from India. And I was curious, and I bought the book. It was by this gentleman called Ernest Wood, who had lived about 100 years back in British India. He had been inspired by J. Krishnamurti, who many of you might have heard of, famous Indian philosopher. And the book was essentially a commentary or treatise on the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. So Patanjali, like I said, was the sage who lived 2,000 years back, who wrote the authoritative manual on yoga. And Ernest Wood's book is a modern day commentary on the same book. And as I flipped this book open and read it, I was fascinated because here there seemed to be a framework that explained my experiences. So this little diagram on the left here shows the 8 stages of yoga as described by Patanjali. And basically it starts with a set of restraints or observances where you control various behaviors, including, adopting a code of morality and, ensuring that you practice compassion and so on and so forth. Followed by what's commonly known as yoga in this country today, asana or posture. So what you see in yoga studios and all the poses is actually just one of the 8 limbs of yoga, because it's followed by breath control, withdrawal of the senses, concentration, meditation, and then complete absorption into the object of your meditation. And I had somehow stumbled across stage number 6, which is concentration. So concentration in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras leads to meditation, which is the flow state. And then meditation, if you meditate long enough at one pointed concentration, that leads to samadhi or oneness. This is samadhi or oneness with the object of meditation. And when the object of the meditation is oneself, when you're curious about who you are and what is this notion of me, then that's when you can achieve the state of clear mind. And so when I read this, I went like, wow, that's very much like the description of what I experienced. Whoops, can folks mute? I hear some noise in the background. So I wanted to call out.
So she called and basically she said that the credits.
Yeah, thanks. So I wanted to call out something with regard to the flow state and concentration. So according to Patanjali, you can pick any object for concentration, and if you concentrate deeply enough of it on it, you can know it to its fullest extent. And this is not a state that's as unfamiliar as many of us think. If you see this picture on the top right, this is a picture of the benzene molecule with a snake around it. And the German scientist Kekulé, who discovered the structure, the circular structure of the benzene molecule, was meditating very deeply on the problem because circular molecules were not known back in his time. And one day he woke up in the middle of the night from a dream where he had seen the snake swallowing its own tail. And he had this flash of insight that the structure of the benzene molecule was circular based on the snake swallowing its own tail. And so this shows that deep concentration can actually lead you to a knowledge of anything, whether it's the self or some other external object. And so there's a lot of promise here in following Patanjali's path. It's not just about self-knowledge, it can be knowledge of other objects as well. What's the purpose of all this, though? It's not just deep insight into objects of the self. The goal of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras is what's called kaivalya. And kaivalya, the best term to describe it is to be as you are. Some of you might have heard of the Indian sage Ramana Maharshi, who lived about, say, 75 to 100 years ago. And be as you are is one of his teachings. And that is the same goal that Patanjali calls out as the ultimate goal of yoga. And I want to throw in one more thing there. Another goal is metta. This is a Buddhist word, or compassion, because without compassion, insight is incomplete. And I came a full circle. I moved to California now that my thesis was complete, and I still was looking for a job, so I was staying with friends and job hunting. And I'd go every day to the University of Berkeley campus to log into my email, to print resumes, so on and so forth. I made friends with the Latina clerk at the local Kinko's, and she would help me make photocopies, and she wanted help in turn to put together a resume for her husband. And so I spent a couple of days writing up a resume for her husband. I made friends with the homeless folk on Telegraph Avenue. So I would talk to them every day. I got to know their personal life stories. So from, you can see how I came a full circle from avoiding the homeless woman back in Kansas, from feeling really uncomfortable in her presence, to being totally at home, hanging out with these homeless folk while I waited for my bus every day. And I truly believe it was that practice of concentration and that achieving of insight that also opened up my heart and enabled me to open up to homeless people, to people who are less fortunate than me. I want to connect this all back to plant medicines. So I had all these interesting experiences of samadhi, of these states of consciousness. And if you tie this all back to the Indian traditions, a lot of you, I'm sure, have heard of soma. Soma is this hallucinogen mentioned in the Rig Veda. So clearly, the Indian tradition has got a long history and association with psychedelics. The secret of soma was lost thousands of years back, so no one quite knows what the formula is. So the speculation that it might be Amanita muscaria, the speculation it's the ephedra plant which grows in the Himalayas, but nobody's quite sure. But in modern India, marijuana and opium and various derivatives from them are very commonly used by yogis all over North India especially. And there's also mention of secret herbs in various tantric and other schools that can lead to very immediate insight. So secret herbs are held or reserved only for quote unquote advanced students because of the dangers of giving them to all and sundry. And I think folks on this call would probably empathize with that. Psychedelics can lead to pretty harrowing experiences if you cannot integrate them, as you know. Well, I had my own samadhi experiences in many years later with salvia. And I think a lot of folks have heard of salvia divinorum. And so I had this experience of what's called nirvikalpa samadhi, or a complete dissolution of self, or non-existence of self. And that happened about 2007 or so. And later on, actually very recently, as late as last September, I had a very similar experience using the Buddhist technique of Vipassana. Vipassana is also a meditation technique. And I saw that the salvia and Vipassana experiences pretty much were almost identical. There's also one more interesting anecdote I want to share with you. Some of you might have heard of Larry Brilliant. He was this doctor, young doctor on the hippie trail in India in the early 1970s. And he ended up encountering this guru called Neem Karoli Baba. And with Neem Karoli Baba's guidance, he became involved in the fight against smallpox in India. And he ended up being instrumental in eradicating smallpox in India. Well, the story goes that he had like hundreds of doses of LSD in his backpack. And when he told Neem Karoli Baba about them, the Baba put his hand out and said, "Give me your LSD." And he handed his entire, batch of LSD to the Baba. And the Baba swallowed it all in a single mouthful. And Larry Brilliant went, "Oh my God, what have I done? He's going to go through the roof. I don't know where he's going to end up." And as it happened, nothing changed at all. Neem Karoli Baba just stayed as he was. And Larry Brilliant was totally confounded. And he just for the next 12 hours, he watched the Baba, but he noticed absolutely no change in his demeanor or personality. It leads me to suspect there's this very expanded state of consciousness that encompasses everything one can experience with psychedelics and more. And it's possible that Neem Karoli Baba is already in that very advanced state. So that's what I had to share. Here are links to my LinkedIn, Medium, and Facebook profiles. You can reach out to me through these links. And as you know, Lakshmi is holding this event to raise funding for entheogenic addiction treatments. And if you're so inclined to contribute to that, you can click on the link at the bottom of the slide and go make your donation. So that's what I had to share.
Thank you so much, Kris. That's really so fascinating, and what a nice slide presentation you put together. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? You're welcome. Does anyone have any questions?
Hey, guess not.
I guess not. Well, I think it's interesting that you know what you talk about all these different things, and about the narrative that you had with homelessness, with your perspective on homelessness, or your attitude, and how it came full circle. So this is, you know, we've been talking about synchronicity and how things connect up, and this is a really great example of how life events conspire to teach you something or evolve your own consciousness, you know, and it came back full circle to where you were then compassionate towards them because you experienced it yourself. And I find that to be a really good example of what happens and how it happens, how things connect up. As soon as you start to expand your consciousness or have the intention to do it, life conspires with you to help you. So I just wanted to make that observation based on what you said.
Yeah, I think so. I think we're all passengers, and life is unfolding these experiences for us, whether it's through psychedelics or other means. And we're just on this journey.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.